Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Dean Bundschu. Dean is the National Ecosystem Development Director for Bunker Labs. Bunker Labs is a national nonprofit network of veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs. They are dedicated to helping the military-connected community start their own businesses. He has been in the entrepreneur space since serving as an Army company commander in Iraq in 2003 and 2004. Dean has seen hundreds of veterans and military spouses start and run successful businesses. So I'm excited to have him on the show to talk about what it takes to start a business and why so many veterans are moving in this direction. So Dean, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Always good to have the opportunity to be with you.
Yeah, this is, as we mentioned, you've interviewed me before, so it's my first time interviewing you on the show. So I'm glad that you could make it.
Yeah, everything comes full circle, right?
Absolutely. So start off, I was just interested in a little bit about how you ended up in the Army as an infantry officer, and eventually you ended up in Iraq as a company commander. So how did you end up in the Army as an officer?
Yeah, I come from a family where a lot of the people, including my dad, served in the military. So I think it was ingrained in me from the time I was born that, service to one's country is a noble endeavor. Honestly, I know my parents still share this story. I probably knew I was going to go into the Army since the time I was probably about 6 years old. So everything I did going through high school, college, everything was geared toward having the opportunity to serve the country in the Army. So I just kind of had that goal from a young age and lived it out, right?
So was it ROTC that you went through?
Right. I initially applied to the service academies. I looked at Annapolis and West Point, Annapolis with the Marine option at the time, and I had my congressional letters and all that good stuff. And luckily, both of them rejected me. And I ended up getting an ROTC scholarship instead. Did 1 year, reconsidered going to the academies after like 1 year in college, but by that time I figured out that I could date in college. And I couldn't do that. So I was like, I think I'll stay in college or ROTC. But that's how I ended up sticking through ROTC rather than going to the academies.
Okay. So you, as I understand your background, you came out of the military for a while and then you got called up for Iraq. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true. I served 5 years active duty and from 96, that's right, May 96 to September 1st, 2001. Of course, 9/11 happened 10 days later. So I was on transition leave 30-day and had a career lined up like most people up here in Raleigh. And 9/11 happened like 3 days later. They called me up and said that my job offer was going to be rescinded because the company was going to do layoffs. So I was like, great.
Oh, wow.
So I actually ended up signing up for the National Guard. I had a great battalion commander. They put me on like back-to-back 6-month ADOS orders. So I did like a year of active duty and got out again. But it seemed like I could never get out of the military, right? Because in January 6, 2003, I got called up off IR. And I told PERSCOM, Human Resource Command, whatever at the time, if you're going to activate me, like activate me to go do something. And I had already been a platoon leader at the time, went through CAS Cube, the advanced course and all that stuff. So I got slotted for a company command and then served in 03, 04 in Iraq.
Wow.
First year of the war, crossed the berm, all that fun stuff.
Wow. So, I mean, if you think about your time in the military, how did that affect you in terms of your leadership and how did that establish some kind of foundational principles for leadership?
Yeah, I always tell people, like, I've never considered myself the smartest person in the room, but I think what my gift is my people skills. And obviously those people skills translated well, and what the military kind of helped do more than anything is just kind of turn some of those people skills into like real leadership skills, right? So, and I was super fortunate. I remember all the way back when I went through Army Basic and Advanced Camp, Sergeant First Class Brian Morrissey, who I later served with at Fort Carson when I was a platoon leader there. He was the NCO of the year when he was at Fort Carson, when he was a first sergeant. And just having him as my platoon sergeant in boot camp, that was like the first real
Yeah.
exposure to what like an actual leader looked like. And obviously having someone who later became NCO of the year, you can imagine the guy was absolutely phenomenal.
Mm.
And having the opportunity to be a part of like that boot camp experience where you watch someone like him take all of us young, 19, 20-year-old kids essentially and turn us into a functioning, cohesive team, like that right there was a lesson unto itself. And of course, going the officer path, you learned rather quick that the backbone of the military is NCOs.
Yeah,
So,
that's absolutely
so
true.
that was one of the first, I guess when you talk about military leadership, exposure to someone who did it the right way. So I think I was very fortunate to have that experience very early on and be,
That's great.
lead mentored. And really, I adopted him as my mentor because I served with him for 4 years at Fort Carson. And, anytime there was any kind of situation I was uncertain of, I would always go to someone like him,
Mm.
So I was lucky to have that throughout my first 4 years as a lieutenant in the Army.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I was interviewing a chief petty officer on my show early when I first started the show, and he said that the chief is the backbone of the Navy. And what he said was kind of interesting. He said, "We're not the head, we're not the brains and the smarts. We leave that up to the officers, and we're not the hands and feet. That's the enlisted men, the sailors." He said, "But we're the backbone that connects the head to the hands and the feet." And I thought that was a really good analogy of what a Navy chief does, which is similar to a senior enlisted in the Army.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And then I guess the other piece of that too is, one of my other mentors still to this day is Colonel David Sutherland. So, and he was my battalion commander there, and now he runs the Dixon Center as part of Easter SEALs, which is their veteran. The portion of Easter SEALs that supports the veteran community. So even when I was thinking about, starting a nonprofit and going down this path with Bunker Labs, not only was he a great leader in the military, but, just his overall leadership across the veteran space. So it's just, it's one of those things when you talk about different people throughout your life, being like that kind of guiding light, having folks like that and being exposed to those really good leaders, I think is kind of what helped shape my leadership background.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I mean, more than anything, when it comes to them, I mean, the thing that stood out was the fact that both of them were very much lead from the front. Neither one of them would do anything if they weren't willing to do it themselves.
Mm.
I think too often, when I've been exposed to bad leaders, it's often the ones who get to a certain point in their career and feel like they don't have to get their hands dirty anymore, right? So it's those leaders who continuously get out there in the field and get their hands dirty, and
Right.
keep in touch with, everyone down to the privates. Those were some of the examples of folks that did that.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think as we get into more of the entrepreneur space and talk about what it takes to be a leader in a startup. If you're not willing to get your hands dirty, you're in the wrong business, because
Yes.
leadership in a startup is an interesting world, and you have to be able to be willing to dive in and pretty much do every job in the business if you want to be successful.
Yep, chief janitor, right?
Chief janitor, but hey, I own a business. I clean toilets, so I know.
Yep, there you go.
So when you left the Army, you kind of quickly moved into the entrepreneur space, in all the different functions you served, and eventually landed at Bunker Labs. But why was the entrepreneur space, the startup space, what was so attractive to you when you came out of the Army and you saw this sort of, there's all sorts of different career paths you could have taken, but you really seemed to gravitate towards the entrepreneur community?
Yeah, I think like most transitioning veterans, like I didn't even know what the word entrepreneurship was when I was in that transition process. But I think also a lot of veterans would be familiar with organizations like, Bradley Morris and Lucas Group and Orion International. And, you go to those groups because that's what everyone else is kind of doing when you're getting out, so that they can help, place you with opportunities. So I followed that path, and it happened that Orion, is headquartered here in Raleigh. Naturally, it's run by two veterans, Bill Laughlin and Randy Nelson. I think you know Randy because he's a submariner too.
Yeah, they actually placed me in
my
my first job out of the military was Ryan placed me there.
there you go. So yeah, it was fortunate for me because I went to that first hiring fair in Orion. I had it in my mind that I was going to go mid-level management, Fortune 500 company, that kind of career path.
Mm-hmm.
And Orion actually met me. And of course, they were working on me to fix up my resume and all that good stuff. And they were like, you need to be in sales. And I'm like, I'm not sales. And they're like, yeah, you're sales. I'm like, no, I'm not. And they're like, yes, you are. So come work for us with sales. And I'm like, well, if you say so, I'll give it a shot, because I walked into a job and I didn't have to go through a whole process. So they hired me that day. And that was fortunate for two reasons. One, I think as an entrepreneur, like understanding sales, is
Really
a
important.
key component, of entrepreneurship in a lot of ways. But I think more importantly, it was the fact that once again, I adopted, Bill and Randy as my mentors. And I watched them continue to grow Orion. And then ultimately, they sold Orion to Center Partners, a big private equity firm. Both of them did exceptionally well. And when I worked for them for 2.5 years, I said to myself, yeah, I'm your number one sales rep and I'm making you guys rich. How do I become rich? And honestly, that was it. I'm just kind of driven, and I watched those two and I was like, inspired by what they did, but I also learned, hard work, because like we talked about getting dirty, they built that company out of their basement.
Yeah.
When you talk about why I went entrepreneurship, it was because I was inspired by two veteran entrepreneurs. And that led me to say, hey, I want to be just like you. And that's kind of what got me going down the entrepreneur path.
Excellent. That's great. I didn't realize that you worked for them. I mean, I knew you were with Orion, but I didn't know you worked with them so closely. So that's a great opportunity.
Yeah, it was really beneficial, because as someone in the sales side of the house too, I mean, I had clients all across the country in all different kinds of industries. So just that exposure,
Mm-hmm.
getting out there and seeing all those different companies, I mean, taught me a lot about all kinds of different industries too. And it also convinced me more than ever that I didn't want to go work for any other company, and that maybe I should think about doing my own thing at the time.
Nice.
So,
That's great. Yeah. Well, I think you're our natural salesman. I've seen you at Bunker Labs, so I think it's good that you're over there. Let me just switch gears a little bit.
yeah.
So, because a lot of people listening to this may not know about Bunker Labs and what you do. So, can you explain a little bit about who Bunker Labs is, what you do, and what you're trying to do across the country?
Yeah. So Bunker Labs, national nonprofit. And what we do is help veterans, military spouses, and other members of military-connected communities start and grow businesses. So concept for Bunker Labs really was born just 6 years ago. Initially it was started by individuals like Tom Connor, Navy vet, up at 1871 with Bunker Incubator. And Todd, like many of us, just wanted to figure out a way to better serve veteran entrepreneurs in his community. And at that same time, there were several of us around the country that were saying, hey, what can we do to better engage veteran entrepreneurs in our communities? So around the same time, he was like kind of planting a flag up in Chicago. I started a local group here called Startup Veterans. And it just so happened that in a couple other communities organically, like this started to happen around the country in places like Washington, D.C. and Austin, Texas. And funny enough, several of us happened to collide at a Patriot Boot Camp in 2015 at Chapel Hill. And I think then that's when we all started saying, we're kind of all doing this in different communities around the country. Like, how can we best support each other, So, and Todd kind of had the vision at that point. He'll tell you, he never expected it to be bigger than the Bunker Incubator 1871. But I think he felt that same momentum and said, hey, what can we do now to take what we're doing in these communities and do it like in every community across the country. So, since that time, 6 years later, we just launched our 39th chapter last week in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We got 2 more on the docket this year, so we'll be up to 41 chapters across the country. So it's been amazing just to see what's taking place in terms of not only the veteran entrepreneurs, but I'm telling you, like a couple years ago, many of these cities didn't even have ecosystems. And now to be, kind of at the forefront and be able to help lead some of these ecosystems with veteran entrepreneurs is incredible. So I think it's only going to get bigger and better over the next couple of years.
That's really cool. I know, for me, I'm here in Raleigh and I've really enjoyed connecting with other entrepreneurs, connecting with other CEOs that are doing what I'm doing. And I tell you, it's invaluable to me having you guys there as a resource. So I've met so many great people. I've heard so many great stories. I mean, Bunker Labs is doing some amazing stuff. I know here in Raleigh, and it sounds like across the country.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And of course, Raleigh and everything we do here is very near and dear to my heart. And it is because entrepreneurship, ultimately entrepreneurship still is in many ways local. But now it's really interesting to see how we're planting these flags in places like Raleigh and Charlotte and Wilmington, and then, across the region, then across the country. And I think the next step is, not only leveraging the local connections, but helping connect these entrepreneurs and communities across the country. Because I know, like, when I was an entrepreneur at Prep Champs and I started my first company, it was difficult enough to establish a network in your backyard, and then tap into that network, for example, for funding, because, we were doing fundraising, and then trying to go outside of your community was 10 times harder. So now, being kind of at the forefront of ecosystem development and mapping the ecosystem in each one of these communities, I think, entrepreneurs are going to be better equipped than ever, which, believe me, that's going to be super important as we, look to rebuild the economy over the next several years.
No, I agree. I think the people that are going to rebuild the economy are entrepreneurs. And I think, I just like to switch gears a little bit. I think one of the things that's interesting is, I see a lot of veterans, going into an entrepreneur space, in startup space. And, just your observation of the past 6 years, what makes, veterans, military spouses, people that have this military background, what makes them kind of uniquely qualified to get into startup businesses, get into, entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think we're going to need to, show even more veterans that this is like a viable path. Because the reality of it is like veteran hiring, as and veteran unemployment's always been higher than the civilian unemployment, right? And now you have the unemployment rate that we have. So I think it's going to be far, far, far more difficult for veterans to seek out those opportunities that were available before. So in a lot of ways, I believe that the only option is going to be entrepreneurship. So planting that seed as soon as possible is absolutely critical. And I think the easiest way to do that is just like with me, is pull these people into this network as quick as possible so that they could see what's possible. Because, like veterans are like, show me, so having that inspiration, having those leaders, I think is going to be critical, so they could see people like you and people like, Deshawn, who we talked a little bit in her company, Southern Elegance Candle, and what's possible. But the bottom line is, I think what veterans don't even realize is how well suited they are to entrepreneurship, because of the military. It's something I touched upon earlier. The bottom line is like entrepreneurship is about building teams, and like who's better at leading and building teams than veterans? And then the thing that's really stood out to me is just, perspective. Like having served in Iraq, when I got back from Iraq, everything when it came to like business and entrepreneur, I always said is easy compared to what we did in the military, right? And for a lot of people, I think that go into entrepreneurship that aren't veterans, like they don't know how to oftentimes handle, the grind. So, and, veterans, like who's better equipped, who's been in the suck and the mud and, had to put the one foot in front of the other. And everyone thinks like entrepreneurship's glamorous because they hear those glamour stories. But as I think you said, like you have to be willing to do everything and to get your hands dirty and to be the chief janitor in addition to the, CEO. And when you talk about hands-on leadership, I think the biggest thing is, veterans are willing to get their hands dirty. And when they start these companies, they do lead by example. And I think, as they grow and the organization grows, being able to say, hey, I was the janitor and I did all this, is something that, comes natural to a veteran. And I just don't think, like, for a civilian entrepreneur that didn't have that experience, like, some of that stuff comes natural.
Yeah, I think I would say this, that it's, when you start a business, I mean, pack a lunch. I see,
Right.
I see, stuff on Instagram. It's got a picture of a guy with a fancy car and a private jet, and it says hustle. That's all you got to do is hustle. I'm like, I've been hustling for years. So I mean,
I
it's
tell
funny.
people it's the only career path. I mean, you got to be real about it too. Of course, the upside's incredible, and a lot of times, the flexibility is great. But the reality of it is, it's the only time you go from, like, working for half the pay, twice as long, right? So, because when you're building a business, you're going to have 80-hour weeks, and
Yeah.
so.
Which,
Um,
it's funny going back to what you just said about, coming out of Iraq, and everything you've done since then seems to be easy. I actually write about that in my new book, is that's what I found when I came into the business world after the military. I kept thinking, when does it get difficult? This seems pretty straightforward. I get to go home every night. I'm home on the weekends. I mean, this is I was living life. I was loving life, and I think when you've had bad things, or you've gone through some tough times, it gives you a perspective that's very unique. And so everything else seems to be easier after that,
Yeah, Nick, well, who
Yeah.
works in Bunker Labs, he always says, "Yep, did I get to see the sunshine? I get to take a shower today. Did I get to eat 3 hot meals? Because
Yeah.
if I got those 3 things, everything else is easy. Because when I was in Iraq, we rarely got to see all that,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the perspective is a big piece.
Yeah, it really is. My story I use is I spent my first patrol was a winter in the North Atlantic, and which was about 10 months before the perfect storm. So if you know exactly, if you know that story,
Yeah, great
that's
movie
what.
and book. Yep.
Yeah, so that's where we were operating near those areas, and yeah, it was a little rough for my first patrol. Thinking this is what submarine life is like. I don't think I'm going to make it. So.
And you didn't get to see the sunshine very often when you're
No,
down.
no. We used to get periscope liberty occasionally,
Yeah.
but that was about it. So as you look at some of the businesses you've been watching over the years, what are some characteristics you've seen, or maybe some stories of leaders that have done a really good job growing their business? What are the things that are maybe consistent with the people that are successful? What are some of those things that you've seen? Or maybe there's even some stories about businesses that have done really well that started from nothing that you've been able to see over the last 6 years.
Yeah, we just talked about, I know you had her on your podcast earlier, but Deshaun Watson, Deshaun Russell. And, one of the things that stands out more than anything is the consistent persistence, So I think a lot of people, when they become entrepreneurs, that especially in our society nowadays, it's everything wants everything to happen now, and as an entrepreneur, we always say, like, everything ends up costing twice as much and takes twice as long than you expect. And I think, like, the people that don't succeed, like, don't realize that they give it a shot and they don't have instant results, and then they just shut it down or move on. And the one thing I've seen more than anything else, from the veteran entrepreneur community, in particular, and the military spouses that are a big part of that community, is that consistent persistence. And what I think that translates to as well as resiliency. The last 6 months, I just wasn't sure, because, so many businesses are shutting down around the country, but it's been incredible because, I'm getting out there in our veteran residence program and interacting with, hundreds of entrepreneurs in all these communities across the country. And I think it's that fact that no matter how difficult things have got, like, these guys have figured out a way. And I think the other key thing that has stood out too is, we always say, like, no plan survives first contact. Everyone thinks, again, you got to have the best plan in the world when you're an entrepreneur, and that you stick to that plan. But the truth of the matter is, the best entrepreneurs know how to pivot quickly.
Yeah.
And I think because we have to react to contact in the military, and oftentimes when you cross that friendly forward line, that op order, like, goes right out the window. I've seen it in action here. All these entrepreneurs over the last 6 months when COVID hit, like, that plan that they were following, the ones who just killed it, threw it right out the window. And a great example of that to me is like Stuart Scheller. He's a Marine recon guy, incredible. He's a lieutenant colonel who's about to become a battalion commander. And he started a company called the Perfect Ribbon while he's been on active duty, and I don't even know how you find the time to be like Marine, MARSOC, battalion commander, running a business full time, and making all kinds of real estate investments and everything else too. But like anything, his business hit a rough patch because he sold retail out of like AFES and everything like that, and they all shut down. So he pivoted not only to online, but he took all his equipment, saw right away, like within the first week, that masks were going to be key, and he took all his laser printers and reconfigured them to make components for all the masks, and then kept his revenue like at pre-COVID levels because of that pivot. So like I don't know if an entrepreneur who wasn't a veteran would have like done something like that. You know what I mean? So I point to people like him and Deshawn, who used to like be storefront. A lot of her revenue came, but not only did she get hammered by COVID, but her storefront got destroyed. When some of the rioting happened down in Fayetteville.
Yeah.
But it forced her to like double down on online. And now, geez, oh man, she made over 100-some thousand in revenue, like in a month. So her business has just grown exponentially. It's been insane.
Yeah, it's really exciting, and she's fun to talk to, and she has that, consistent persistence. I think is definitely in her blood, in her DNA, and I think that's a great way to describe it. I think, my journey has been one of just every day, pressing through, and it seems like every day something's wrong with the business, right? I never seem to get everything aligned right. I got orders up, but I'm out of inventory, or I've got, I've got too many orders, or not enough orders, or it's never a balance, or I get orders grow, I need cash, I'm out of cash because the orders are growing, and it's always something when you're as an entrepreneur, and you just have to be able to deal with whatever is going to be what you face that day. You've got to get over it. You got to get through it. So,
yeah, I think that one other piece that I just add to that too, I think one of the things that I've noticed quite a bit about a lot of the good entrepreneurs is military, you have to be both strategic and tactical. You have your strategic plans, then you have to be able to tactically execute.
Yeah.
You have to be able to do both. And think about like in the civilian world, that's just not often the case. A lot of times you have like the pure tactical guys who are like great managers and great workers, or you have like the strategics who can kind of guide an organization. But when you first start a company, like you have to strategically plan and be able to tactically execute. And I just think, veterans obviously are really well equipped to do that.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly what you have to do on a regular basis, because you don't have an army of people around you to think, I got a strategy guy over here, I got an operations guy over here. You're everything, right? And cutting the yard when it gets long. So around our property. So what are maybe some of the biggest surprises you've seen in the past 6 years with companies? Any big surprises that you I don't know, which is really notable, like whether a business really took off, or one that you thought was really well positioned and then never went anywhere?
I like pointing local examples sometimes. Okay. I think, Spiffy is a great company.
Yeah.
And Carl Murphy. And I remember when I first met Carl at a Bull City Venture Capital, their annual, the State of Venture Capital Conference. And literally he was, just starting Spiffy. But you talk about being able to see the big picture. Like, I love his story because he came out of the military and he bought a couple car washes. And around that time, he just saw an opportunity because he was intuitive enough to pick up on the whole Lyft, Uber, Airbnb. And he is like, you know what, I could just make money off these car washes, or I could create the Uber for car washes. And literally he came and spoke to our first cohort. Now I think he had just maybe raised his first 500,000, or he was about to. And now you look at Spiffy and they've raised like 30 some million. I think they're in 20 or 30 different cities all across the country.
Wow.
Yep. And then I watched them even through COVID. Some of the things they've done to pivot have been incredible. How they went from primary B to C to figured out B to B, and going into corporations and then getting the corporations to offer as a perk. So you go to companies and see, the spiffy parking spots, and so the employees get their car wash for free because it's an employee perk. I just think, he's textbook, and I talked to him a lot about that, and he credits totally being an Army infantry company commander.
Wow.
With the fact that relentless, consistent persistence, the standard operating procedures, the continuity, the systematic approach, all that stuff. So I think, looking at him in this community, that's textbook for someone that started out with car washes and now turned into the nationwide Uber for car washes.
Isn't that incredible? Yeah, it's a great story. Great story. Like, your business just growing like crazy. So.
Yep. And I mean, he is just hard charging, really, really strong leader. But more importantly, when you talk about leadership, like, that guy built an incredible team. And he brought Scott Wingo on board, and Scott has sold multiple companies for like 500+ million, raised an ungodly amount of money, took Channel Advisor public, and Scott got him to be the CEO. Like,
wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, Carl got Scott to be the CEO. So it's just incredible. What he's done with Spiffy. So, and the other great example here locally, I think you probably heard him speak at our muster, is David Morgan with Bandwidth.
Yes.
And crazy enough, the day they went public, they rang the opening bell on Bunker Labs, ran the closing bell on NASDAQ. And I just thought that was awesome, with David being a Marine. But another entrepreneur that's just built an incredible company. And I think they sometimes run underneath the radar.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
Because that company just announced that they're going to be hiring. When everyone else was tanking during COVID, they announced that they're hiring 1,400 more people.
Wow. Wow.
So, and he is a phenomenal leader who gives back to the community as well. So look for them to do more and more great things here, for not just with Bandwidth, but I think for entrepreneurs throughout, Raleigh and the veteran community as well.
That's fantastic. That's great. So one last question before we wrap up. We talked about the characteristics of leading a startup company. But what, in general, your experience with the military and in business, what are some characteristics of a great leader, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I touched upon a few times. You absolutely cannot underestimate the lead from the front. The quickest way to lose the trust of the team that you're building is to not want to get your hands dirty. So, even at Bunker Labs, I think one of the most important things, is, again, with 41 communities all across the country, it's getting out there and actually really getting to know each one of your people. And I think, that's another thing when you talk about just leadership in general. It's actually really understanding what motivates, because every single individual is different. And I think, the really good leaders who know how to, not build teams and motivate teams. I remember one of the worst leaders I had in the military said, "Do you know what leadership style you need to have?" And I was like, "No." And he was like, "Mine. You need to emulate my leadership style," And I was like, that's the worst advice I ever heard, because the fact that, so it's like one of those things to not do. So I think, a really good leader actually needs to understand, like, how to motivate, what makes people tick. So really getting to know all your folks is key. And I think that's, at least my experience with the leaders I had in the military, those are the kind of people I had. So that's one of the biggest things that I emphasize to people, because, although we've emphasized how you have to start out doing it all, you have to do that to start the company, but to scale and grow a company, you have to be able to build a team. Because when you talk about entrepreneurs who I haven't seen succeed, it's those entrepreneurs that for some reason think that they have to continue to do it all. And I've seen some great entrepreneurs with great ideas who maybe even are doing okay, that absolutely don't trust people enough to build a team around them. And I just see them squandering what could be huge opportunities. And sometimes a business fails for that very reason. So on one hand, it's the team, it's the other hand. I mean, on one hand, it's the leadership and the need to be able to do it all in the beginning, but then it's also the ability to step back, reassess, figure out where you have gaps as you grow, and then bring the right people on, and then lead and motivate those people to scale.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's I see that a lot of times where entrepreneurs get stuck is that they've always done it themselves, and they can't let go of having control of everything, and they don't hire the right team and great people underneath them that'll grow it and continue it, and I think that's a problem. But yeah, I know from my personal experience, it's always been about the team. The team has been what has delivered everything that we've done so far. You know, I've got an amazing team. It's almost like, you know, we go up against $40 billion companies every day, $150 billion companies every day. And they have a land army. I say, well, we have a SEAL team. We have a very talented, small group of people that can do amazing things. We're just not very big right now. So, you know.
But that's the beauty about being sometimes a smaller company is you have less bureaucracy. You can be far more agile. So, and that's exactly what you do. Then you run circles around your competition. So,
and we have during COVID, we've grown. I mean, we're 33% above last year and just kind of growing in the middle of a, you know, global pandemic. So I think my competitors have sort of let their guard down, and we've been able to just kind of grow. So my little company's growing. So it's good to see that against the big guys. So
yeah, I know. I've seen how much you guys grown over just since I met you, which I think was like 2 years ago. So you are definitely one of the entrepreneurs I point to as another one of those great examples of veteran entrepreneurs doing great things here for not just this community, but I think for the overall veteran military spouse community with the book you did and these podcasts and everything else. So definitely leading the way, man.
Yeah, thanks. Well, gotta keep teaching and sharing, right? Gotta help the next generation of leaders is what I want to do. So how can people connect with you, find out more about Bunker Labs and what you guys do?
Sure. So one of the easiest things to do is if you have the opportunity, check out bunkerlabs.org. And bunkerlabs.org is kind of the hub. It kind of points you in all the right directions. But, you know, I think folks, when they get on there, they can see where all our chapters are located. And if they take a look at whatever chapter is closest to them, they can see who the local city leaders are, and all the emails are listed so they could connect and reach out to them. Naturally, the schedule for all the events, once we start ramping things back up, both virtual events and live events, you know, are kind of housed there. And then I think the other thing I always tell people, you know, we've really, really put a lot of energy and effort into building our online presence with the Launch Lab Online, which is like an introduction to entrepreneurship. And then the Bunker Labs online community, which is kind of like the place where people who are interested in entrepreneurship can plug in and connect, you know, online, almost like a Facebook for like veteran entrepreneurs. So those are all great places. And then naturally, if anyone ever wants to reach out to me for anything, I'm happy to help out in any way. My email is dean.bundschu, BUNDSCHU, at bunkerlabs.org.
Okay, sounds great. I'll put links in our show notes for all those resources so people can reach out to you, find a local chapter, see how they can connect. And just a curious question, what if you're not in the military community, you're not a veteran, you're not a military spouse? What way is there ways to help Bunker Labs or help support Bunker Labs?
Yeah, that's a great question.
How is that done?
Yeah, I mean, we highly encourage, you know, I've always said, like, the worst thing you could do with, like, you know, any veteran is just keep them isolated among veterans, because part of the transition process in general is that they integrate with the civilian population, right? So, you know, we have all kinds of amazing just entrepreneurs and other different leaders in different industries that participate in Bunker Labs, who just want to give back, you know, and support entrepreneurs, like you said. So it's highly encouraged that anyone out there who supports veteran entrepreneurs get involved. And then there's a myriad of ways to do that. It's mentors, potentially, if they have a, you know, product or service that's valuable to veterans, all that good stuff. As you know, when we do all our bunker brews in person, there's all kinds of people, you know, throughout this community. And the reason why I think, you know, our communities thrive is because the communities at large are really embracing veteran entrepreneurs, and that's important.
Okay, very good. Well, so if you're not in the military, you're not a veteran, you're not a military spouse, you still can get involved with Bunker Lab. So check them out and see what you can do to help, again, grow this community of entrepreneurs and people coming out of the military spouses. So it's a great organization. I know I'm involved. And Dean, I really appreciate everything that you've done for me. And I appreciate you being on the show and sharing all of your wisdom. I think you shared some great stuff, and I've got some notes here. And I mean, I really do. I'm kind of keep thinking about consistent, persistent. I really like that concept of just being consistent with your persistence. So love that. So,
Well, right back at you, man. So thank you for having me today. It's always good to connect with you, and it's always good to, like you said, hopefully inspire and be able to equip and connect the next generation of veteran entrepreneurs.
that's great. So I appreciate your time.
Yours too. Thank you. Good job.
Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.